And so it can be tricky. And they changed names at different times anyway throughout their lives. We don't change our names very much other than maybe a woman changing her last name when she gets married. Maybe, the occasional person gets a name change for some other reason. But for the most part, you stick with your name your whole life. In our culture, in our society, that was not necessarily the case for them. They did change their names to reflect different chapters of their lives and different important things about them, or they were just known by different names. So all of that can muddy the waters a little bit for what was Jonathan's son's birth name. What name was he going by now? Is this a name given to him for the story? It certainly does fit his role here in the narrative of the house of Saul, because throughout the books of Samuel, the big trend we have seen is Saul's house declines and David's house rises. David's house is getting a lot of honor and prestige and growing in power, and Saul's house is falling apart and it is dying in dishonor. And there's almost no one left, and David has an opportunity here to just, smush out the last bit of Saul's house if he wants to. But that's not what he wants to do here. So a little unclear about some of the naming things with this, but let's get the main idea of the narrative in mind here. Mephibosheth's role in this story is to show that Saul's house doesn't completely die out, doesn't completely live in dishonor, because David is going to fulfill his promise to Jonathan, the covenant that he had previously made. And we do remember that covenant, right? Why did David and Jonathan make a covenant at all? Jeff?
Jonathan knew that David was going to be the next king. And he had faith in God about that. He wanted nothing to happen to his
Yeah. So Jonathan is stepping aside peacefully. He's not going to fight David for the throne, and let's not underestimate how much of a sacrifice that is, because Ishbosheth certainly does fight David for the throne. That's Jonathan's brother. But what he wants for that, and because he is such good friends with David, is this promise that David is not going to seek vengeance against his family, but he's going to try to take care of them and to treat them kindly. And that's a promise that David made years before at this point in, I don't want to say a simpler time. Life was actually pretty complicated for David right about then. Saul wanted to kill him. That's right when David started to go on the run. So things certainly were still messy. But his responsibilities were fewer back then. He was not yet king. Being king was some distant, far-off thing. And it's easy to make promises about what I'm going to do once I become king. But then once you're actually in that role, once you actually have these problems to deal with, is David going to fulfill his promise? And we see that, yes, he has every intention to do so. So David sends for Mephibosheth, and what happens when they meet? Aaron.
Mephibosheth falls prostrate, before David, and uses servant language. Well,
Yeah.
He says, "I'm your servant," basically.
Yeah. The subtext here is, I am not a threat. I am not going to try to take your place. I am not going to try to cause trouble for you. I am not going to be a critic of your regime. I am not anything you need to worry about. I am, and that servant language, like you're saying, I am your servant. He is, without saying it exactly, asking for David to spare his life. And we look at that and go, well, I mean, David wants to do kind things to him, wants to take care of him, and that's what he said this whole time. Why would he expect anything different? You got to put it in that historical context and to know how dangerous of a position it was to be a member of the previous regime's family.
And Mephibosheth, fled as a young he hasn't been around.
Yeah.
I don't know how news travels or, what you would know of David on the type of king that he's been. I think it's a very, reasonable reaction for him to be afraid.
Yeah. Well, and think about this. Mephibosheth knows my grandfather tried really hard to kill the man who is now currently king. Is David likely to feel very good about me and my family? Probably not. And we don't know what all that Mephibosheth knew, as you're saying. How he is trying to lay low, live a quiet life. If he can live out the rest of his days without being found, he's going to be pretty happy.
He knew that his grandfather did, but he also might have known that his dad, was not an enemy of David.
Yeah.
He was his best friend.
Yeah.
So he might not have had all the fear that Saul's other descendants had.
Yeah. Yes, if anyone has reason to have some hope, he certainly would. I think it's pretty likely that he would have known something about that from his father, Jonathan. But at best, his emotions are going to be complicated here because this is a very uncertain and scary situation. And he is looking to come out of this unscathed and alive, if at all possible. But David has bigger plans than just that. It's not just, I'm going to spare you, I'm not going to execute you. Is that he wants to show him kindness. So he says in verse 7, do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. Then I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always. And he, Mephibosheth, paid homage and said, what is your servant that you should show such regard for a dead dog such as I? So David makes that offer, not even just offer, tells him, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to restore your family lands to you. You're going to have this place of honor of eating at the king's table for the rest of your days. That you will be taken care of, you will not be harmed, and some honor will be restored to the house of Saul. And Mephibosheth is rightfully overwhelmed with gratitude for this, very thankful that David would do such a thing. I want to point out something that we haven't talked about in this so far, but every time that you have seen the word kindness in this chapter, and actually quite a bit in Samuel, it is a very special word in the Bible. And that Hebrew word is hesed, which you got to say with a little guttural thing in the back of your throat, so I'm told. I butchered it, but what that word is more than just being nice. It's more than just kindness. It's more than just love. Your Bible, your translation, at different times where this word is used, might have the word loving kindness. I think that's what the King James uses. You might have loyal love, or just kindness, or faithfulness, faithful love. There's a few different ways that this is translated. Yes. 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 So this is much more than a static moment of, I have chosen to be nice to you. This is a combination of love and kindness along with a sense of loyalty and devotion, that I have promised to do this for you. I'm binding myself to a covenant. There's definitely covenant terminology in this. That I will treat you well and show love for you without end. And that is a word that is very commonly used to describe God's commitment to us, that he shows loyal love toward us and demands loyal love in return. So it's actually an incredibly interesting word study. It's been on my list for a while to do a lesson on this word and to go in different places in the Bible that talk about it. But if that's not a word you're very familiar with, I can recommend looking into it because it definitely enlightens a lot of what is going on in these texts. Jeff?
Well, it's also like honor and respect. You know? He didn't just say, okay, hey, you're not gonna have any problems or whatever. I'm not gonna come after you, kill you or anything like that. I mean, he set up, was it Ziba or whatever, to take care of, he's gonna take care of your land. You're gonna come stay with me. You're gonna be as one of my sons. You know, that's not just, one of my servants or, you know, you're gonna live in my house and take care of me. No, you're gonna be one of my sons.
Yeah, there's David did more than just what he had to. You know, he could have reasoned in his mind, well, not killing Mephibosheth fulfills my covenant with Jonathan, because that's really what I should do here. Or just, maybe giving him some small stipend to kind of help him out while he lives in obscurity over there. That would be enough. David wasn't just looking to see what was technically enough. I used to tease Lauren. I don't make this joke as much anymore, but I used to tease Lauren. I said, now that we're married, that I am contractually obligated to care about you. And she's like, oh, that is just the most romantic thing which you could ever say. And why does that sound weird? Because that's like just the loyalty part without the love, right? Just that sense of duty of like, I contractually have to do this. That's one part of it, and that brings some of the intensity behind it and the devotion, but adding the love and the kindness piece means you're looking for more than just what you are contractually obligated to do or what you feel like that you have to do. So this is actually a very good illustration of the way that God treats us and the way that he wants us to treat him. God has never said, what's the least I have to do to bless Danny? What's the least I have to do to bless the church? God is always looking for opportunity to bless us, to take care of us, to show love toward us. And in return, he doesn't want us to ask, what is the least I have to do and still make it to heaven? As if we're looking at a grading rubric and we're thinking, like, what do I got to do to get the C, just to pass? You know, the bare minimum and nothing more. God wants more than that. He wants that loyal love. He wants that chesed. Let's see, who else had their hand up? Lisa? No. Yeah. Yeah, it's this is definitely a type and a shadow of what God shows us, how God has treated us. God is the fulfillment of this idea to all its fullness. To whatever degree David did it, God did it better. Betty.
Well, at the very beginning, you asked what kind of a king was David. And to me, this shows that he had compassion, he had love, he was generous, and he remembered his commitment to Jonathan.
Yeah.
To me, that's what kind of a king David was.
I think this illustrates it very well, that David had not been hardened by his new rule, was not just thinking practically of what is the safest thing for me to do to keep my position of power, killing all potential enemies. He's looking to fulfill his duties, fulfill his obligations, and the covenant even that he made that many years ago. Mark.
It's hard to know everything about what's going on in Ziba's and Mephibosheth's lives right now.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of, just officialness about what David is doing in this whole matter. And in my mind, I'm looking at Mephibosheth and I'm thinking, hey, you're already probably living a pretty good life. Why would you want to use your hands? But he goes ahead and accepts that invitation. And that was a level of humility on his part, in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And setting up this very official arrangement that Ziba and his family would manage this land for Mephibosheth. I mean, remember, he is crippled in the feet. Like, he's not going to go out there and work that land, obviously. And giving some honor to Saul's house there, that it's, you don't have to work the land yourself, even if you could, even if there was not that physical impediment there in your way, that you have people to work that land for you. That was something that Saul's house had previously, people to do their bidding, people to take care of them, and things that were lost in this. Jeff?
Would you be afraid that you hit your uncle's house?
Excuse me?
Would you be afraid that you hit your uncle's house?
Your uncle's house? No.
Especially if you knew that your uncle wasn't violent towards you?
Yeah.
You know, stuff. I mean, because David's first wife was Saul's daughter.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that's what David is working to show Mephibosheth, is like that you don't have any reason to fear in this house. Mark?
When I read that he prostrated himself before David, does that mean that he had some ability to walk upright? I don't know. I mean, he would have been in that position anyway, or he would have been sitting and doing it, I don't know. But I kind of get the feeling that maybe he wasn't able to walk like everybody else. He made it get around.
Yeah, it's we're not given all the details of exactly what level his disability was. Enough to be called crippled, though somehow, one way or another, he got into a prostrate position. I always do that. Of bowing before David. But yes. Okay, go ahead.
Do you think Ziba got this land is his already? Got Saul's land is his now?
I know why you're asking that, because the way that David says it here to him, like ensuring that Ziba knows that this is Mephibosheth's land, I doubt it. I doubt that Ziba saw this as opportunity. I think what's a lot more likely is, as someone who was connected to the previous regime, he also was in a vulnerable position and was similarly trying to lay low and not attract David's attention. If he's going to go around trying to take land that the previous king's house had, he's going to attract a lot of attention from David. It's probably not what he wanted. That being said, Ziba was not as obscure as Mephibosheth was, because David knew where to find him and didn't know where to find Mephibosheth, or even if Mephibosheth existed. So that's a little bit unclear. Aaron?
But someone's taking care of the land right now.
Somebody is, yes.
And probably Ziba's
He could be.
household.
Yeah, he could be. Or David's got somebody else. Since Saul's house doesn't have it anymore, it's likely that David now owns it. And so either Ziba is continuing to take care of it, or David had somebody doing it. Whatever the situation was, by the end of this, it's now Mephibosheth's, and Ziba and his family will take care of it for him.
And who tries to take the land later? When David flees Jerusalem, when Absalom takes over?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Ziba, right? Isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, there's some goofiness that goes on with us. Jeff?
David is just clarifying, just in case, it's not clear
Yeah.
Ziba might have been taken care of, but it's like, because of the death of everybody else, look at all this land right here, his crops are up and all that stuff. And so as long as I'm taking care of
Yeah.
And David might have just been clarifying to, yeah, you're going to take care of it, but it is.
Yes. In every official and legal way, it is Mephibosheth's, and that is a pretty amazing expression of kindness and grace. Mark?
And he does have a son.
Yes, he does have a son.
Very meaningful as well.
Right. That we don't expect for the house of Saul to just die out here with Mephibosheth either, because yes, there is a son involved, and this is going to continue. Anything else through chapter 9? Yeah, okay.
Well, his son then has 4 sons. So it starts with the building of the posterity of Saul.
Yeah.
It starts increasing again.
Yeah. So look what Jonathan accomplished then. By Jonathan not opposing David and having this covenant with him and stepping aside so that David could be the next king, as God said, Jonathan has preserved his family's honor, has enabled a continuation of this line that would not have happened otherwise. So something very valuable has occurred here. That being said, though some honor is restored to Saul's house, it never again comes to power as ruling over Israel. That chapter is over. That was the punishment that God gave to Saul's house of they're not going to rule again. They're never this threat to become rulers over Israel. It's David's line that reigns from here on out. Okay, chapter 10. It says in verse 1, after this, the king of the Ammonites died, and Hanun his son reigned in his place. And David said, I will deal loyally, and that loyally is the same hesed word that was kindness last chapter. I will deal loyally with Hanun the son of Nahash, as his father dealt loyally with me. And so the first question is, who is Nahash? Do we remember this guy at all? Okay.
Well, he was ruler of the Ammonites,
Mm-hmm.
but he had been subdued by David.
He had been subdued by Saul, even, actually.
Yeah.
Yes. And when was that? How did that happen? I lose track of these names too, so I'm just trying to connect the dots for us. Yeah, later.
In 1 Samuel chapter 11.
Yes. 1 Samuel 11. Okay, so a little refresher. The events that happened there. This is right when Saul is the fresh, new king of Israel. And Jabesh Gilead is under threat, under siege of Nahash, king of Ammon. And he's the one who said, if you surrender, I'll just gouge out all of your right eyes. That's my mercy that I'll show toward you. If you don't surrender, then you'll starve in this siege, or we'll come in here and kill you all. So they're in a very dangerous position. And this is one of Saul's finest moments, that as the new king, he rallies the people and says, we're gathering together to go fight against Nahash, to go show him that he can't do this in Israel, that we have a king now, and this king will protect us from our enemies. And so they go and they defeat Nahash, they save Jabesh Gilead, and Nahash is subdued by Saul. And that's really the last that we've heard of Nahash until we get to this point where there's kind of a different story involved, that apparently David and Nahash are pretty chummy, that they get along just fine. And he even says that Nahash has dealt loyally with him, and so David feels some obligation to try to treat his son kindly. So, any ideas as to how this may have happened? Please.
Well, if they had heard about the Deputy King, they would have sent people to show kind of homage to the king's daughter, you know, to show honor or respect. Just as you would go to a memorial.
Yeah, that's definitely something you do, but like maybe not to people you're at war with and that you hate. So like, how did David and Nahash even get to the point, we think, of treating each other loyally and having some bond there? Because that was certainly not the case with Saul and Nahash. I realize I'm asking you to speculate a little bit here. No, that was the Philistines. These are the Ammonites. So these are different people here. Ultimately, like, I'll just be straight up here. We don't like have a perfect answer. Okay, so if you're looking for a perfect answer, we don't have one. There is a gap in the narrative here that we're not told. However, I think there's a pretty reasonable inference we can make here that David was, in the minds of many, the enemy of Saul. We talked about how David did not look at it that way, and David was not really trying to actively oppose Saul. Not everybody's going to get that nuance. Okay? What people are going to see from the outside is Saul's the old king, David's the guy who wants to be the new king, and if David's the enemy of Saul, then Nahash is the enemy of Saul. Well, how does the saying go? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I think you got a little bit of that going on. That they find some connection, but Nahash is more willing to have a peaceful and productive relationship with David because they both are kind of against Saul in this. So for whatever reason, and we don't have a totally perfect answer, the Ammonites are at peace a lot more with Israel when David is king, at least at first, because Nahash is more willing to work with David. And that's my time. So with that cliffhanger, we will discuss how it all comes crashing down next week. But chapter 10 is not that long, so I anticipate being able to go on to chapter 11. Thanks.